I need to check the names to avoid them write the story. The forbidden names are Emily Carter, Whitney, Mark, Daniel, Hannah Shawell Brennan, Caroline, Patricia, Theo, Laurel, Jason, Renee, Deb, Avery, Sawyer, Mom, Dad, Nate, Sasha, Priya, Claire, Trevor, Amber, Becca, narrator, Kelsey, the brother, the aunt, Vanessa, Gwen, Marcus, Grandma. I'll use Lydia, narrator, Brother Cole, parents referred to as my mother, my parents, Uncle Doug, company colleague Beth. I grew up believing that loving your family meant proving yourself to them, over and over in 100 different ways, until you had nothing left to prove, and they still weren't satisfied. My mother used to say that success was something you earned, not something you inherited. She said it at dinner tables, at holiday gatherings, at the edge of my bedroom door when I was 14 and she was deciding whether to come in or just keep walking down the hallway. She believed it the way people believe in things they've never actually tested against themselves. She'd married into money. My father's family had built a regional logistics company from a single truck and a borrowed warehouse in central Ohio, and by the time my parents got married, that company had 12 locations and a regional contract with 2 of the largest retail chains in the Midwest. My mother had never earned anything the hard way in her adult life, but she loved to talk about earning. My brother was 4 years older than me, and from the time I was old enough to understand what favoritism looked like, I understood that he was the favorite. It wasn't subtle. It was the kind of thing that sat at the dinner table with us every night, took up space, breathed. My brother got the car at 16. I got a lecture about responsibility. My brother got the college fund, fully paid, no strings. I got told that if I wanted to go to a good school, I needed to work for it, and to their credit, I did. I got a partial scholarship to a state school, worked 20 hours a week through all 4 years, graduated with a degree in business, and a very clear understanding of what it meant to be the second choice in your own family. I don't say any of this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because it matters. It's context. It's the soil. Everything else grew in. After college, I moved to Columbus and took a job at a mid-sized marketing firm. I was good at it. Better than good, actually. I had a way of seeing what clients needed before they knew how to ask for it, and within 3 years I'd been promoted twice and was managing a team of 7. I was 26 years old, renting a 1-bedroom apartment near the short north, cooking most of my own meals, paying off my student loans ahead of schedule. I was proud of that life. It was mine. I had built it from scratch without a single dollar from my parents. Meanwhile, my brother had moved back home after a failed attempt at law school, and my parents had quietly folded him into the family business. Not in a junior role. Not starting from the bottom. He came in as operations director, a title that had previously belonged to a man named Gerald who'd worked there for 19 years and was let go 3 weeks after my brother arrived. My father called it a restructuring. Gerald called his attorney. I found out about Gerald from my uncle, my father's younger brother, who had a small ownership stake in the company and had been part of the original build from the very beginning. He called me one Sunday afternoon, his voice carrying that particular kind of tired that comes from watching something you love get slowly dismantled. "Your father's making changes," he said. "I don't think all of them are good ones." I told him I was sorry to hear that. I asked if there was anything I could do. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That depends on how serious you are about the business." I didn't fully understand what he meant at the time, but I filed it away. The following Thanksgiving, my parents hosted at the house in Dublin, the same house I'd grown up in. 5 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard that backed up to a small nature preserve. My mother spent 3 days cooking. My father polished the good silverware. My brother showed up 2 hours late with a woman none of us had met before, introduced her as his girlfriend, and was greeted like a returning hero. I brought a homemade pie and a bottle of good wine. My mother thanked me for the pie the way you thank a neighbour. We were seated at the dining room table, my parents at either end, my brother to my father's left, me across from him, when my father cleared his throat and made an announcement. He was formalizing the ownership structure of the company. He and my mother would retain 60%. My brother would receive 25%, effective immediately, as part of his role expansion. The remaining 15%, the stake that had been loosely designated for future family considerations, the The slice that I had quietly believed for years might someday include me was being absorbed back into the primary structure. My mother smiled at my brother. My father raised his glass. I sat there with my fork in my hand. No one looked at me. I put the fork down slowly. My brother was mid-sentence about something, some plan he had for the fleet routing system, and my father was nodding along the way he always did when my brother spoke, with his whole body leaning forward, like every word was a gift. I watched them, and I felt something shift inside me. Not break, not collapse, shift, like a weight redistributing. And what about me? I asked. The table went quiet in that specific way that tells you the question wasn't unexpected. It was just unwelcome. My mother picked up her wine glass. My brother looked at the centerpiece. My father met my eyes for exactly 2 seconds and then said, "You've built a good life for yourself, Lydia. You don't need the business." "That's not an answer," I said. "It's the answer we have," he said. My mother set her glass down. "You never showed any interest in the company." "I showed interest for years," I said. "You just never invited me in." "You moved away," my brother said, like that explained everything. "To Columbus. There's 2 hours from here." "The point is," my father said, his voice taking on that final word tone I'd heard my whole childhood, "the structure is decided. This isn't the place to discuss it." I thought about a lot of things in the 20 seconds that followed. I thought about Gerald, who'd given 19 years and lost his job so my brother could have a title. I thought about my uncle's phone call. I thought about the conversation I'd had 6 months earlier with a business attorney named Philip, who had explained to me, very patiently and very precisely, how minority equity stakes in private companies worked, how transfer of ownership was documented, and what it would take to formalize an acquisition. I thought about the paper I had signed 4 months ago, the paper that my uncle had countersigned, the paper that Philip had filed with the state of Ohio. I picked up my wine glass. "Okay," I said. "We don't have to talk about it now." My father nodded, satisfied. My mother started asking my brother's girlfriend about her job. The conversation moved on. I ate my turkey. I had 2 glasses of wine. I helped clear the table afterward, and I hugged my mother at the door when I left, and I drove home on the dark highway, listening to the radio and feeling, for the first time in a very long time, completely calm. Here's what my father didn't know. 4 months before that Thanksgiving dinner, my uncle had sold me his 15% ownership stake in the company. He'd been trying to exit cleanly for 2 years. He was 61, his wife had health issues, he wanted to move to Sarasota and not think about freight routing anymore. And my parents had been stalling the buyout conversation, offering lowball numbers, making it complicated. He was frustrated. I had savings, I had a business degree and 3 years of financial modeling experience, and a very good understanding of what that 15% was actually worth. We agreed on a price. I liquidated part of my investment portfolio, took a small personal loan, and bought it. Philip handled the paperwork. My uncle was in Florida by October. 15% wasn't a controlling stake. I knew that going in. But it was enough to be a named minority shareholder. It was enough to have legal standing. It was enough to request documentation, to attend shareholder meetings, to ask questions that required answers. And it was enough, when combined with a specific clause in the original company operating agreement that my uncle had quietly pointed out to me, to trigger a mandatory mediation process if certain operational decisions were made without minority shareholder notification. My brother had been making those decisions for 6 months. I didn't do anything dramatic at Thanksgiving. I went home, I slept well, and on Monday morning I had Philip send a formal letter to the company's registered address requesting a shareholder meeting and a full accounting of the operational changes made in the prior fiscal year. The letter was polite, it was precise, it cited the specific sections of the operating agreement by number. My father called me that afternoon. "What is this?" he said. I could hear him trying to control his voice and not quite managing it. "It's a formal request," I said. "As a shareholder." Silence. How are you a shareholder?" "Uncle Doug sold me his stake in July," I said. "It was a private transaction, properly filed. Philip can send you the documentation if your attorney needs it." More silence. Longer this time. "Why didn't you tell us?" I thought about Thanksgiving. I thought about the centerpiece my brother had stared at. I thought about my father's 2-second eye contact, and his final word voice, and the way no one had looked at me when the announcement was made. "You didn't ask," I said. He hung up. My mother called an hour later. Her approach was different, softer, more careful, the voice she used when she was trying to manage a situation. She said she was sure we could work this out. She said family didn't need lawyers. She said I was being hurtful. "I'm being a shareholder," I said. "Those are different things. Lydia," her voice tightened, "do you understand what you're doing to this family?" "I understand what was done to me," I said. "At a dinner table, in front of everyone, without a conversation, without a heads up, without so much as a phone call beforehand to say, by the way, we're formalizing ownership and you're not included." I found out with a fork in my hand. She didn't say anything. "I'm not trying to blow up the company," I said. "I'm asking for transparency. I'm asking to be treated like what I legally am, a stakeholder. That's it. Your brother has been working there every day." "I know. And I'm glad the business has someone running operations. I'm not asking him to step down. I'm asking for a shareholder meeting and an audit. That's a normal thing to ask for." She said she needed to talk to my father. I said that was fine. I said Philip's number was on the letter. The shareholder meeting happened 6 weeks later, in January, at the company's main office in Westerville. I drove down on a grey Tuesday morning in my regular car, wearing my regular coat, walked into a conference room where my father sat at the head of the table with his attorney, and my brother sat to his left, looking like he hadn't slept. I sat across from them with Philip beside me, and a notepad in front of me, and I was, for the first time in my memory, completely at ease in a room with my family. The audit took 8 weeks. What it found wasn't criminal. I want to be clear about that. But it wasn't nothing either. There were undocumented expense approvals, vendor contracts that had been renegotiated without board notification, 2 operational pivots that had reduced margins in ways that hadn't been disclosed to minority shareholders. Small things, individually. Together they painted a picture of a company being run like a private fiefdom, which, to be fair, it had always been, it just hadn't had a shareholder paying attention before. Philip presented the findings. My father's attorney said most of it was within acceptable bounds. Philip said most wasn't all. There were 3 specific items that weren't within acceptable bounds, and for those we had options. We didn't litigate. I didn't want to litigate. What I wanted, what I'd always wanted, if I'm being honest, was a seat at the table. A real one, not a courtesy invitation to holiday dinners where announcements got made and no one looked at me. The settlement we reached gave me a formal advisory board seat, a quarterly reporting requirement, and the right of first refusal on any future ownership transfers. It also required my brother to attend a governance training with the company's existing board, a condition that my father fought hard and lost. My brother didn't speak to me for 3 months after that. My mother called me in March on a Sunday, which is when she calls when she's not calling about a crisis. Her voice was different, not the managing voice, not the tight voice, something older and quieter. "I've been thinking," she said. I waited. "I don't think we handled things well," she said. It was the closest she'd ever come to an apology. I knew that. I accepted it for what it was. "I know you didn't mean to leave me out," I said, which wasn't entirely true but was what I was able to offer. "Your father is proud," she said. "He doesn't know how to say he was wrong. I know that too. Are you okay with all of this?" I looked around my apartment. The morning light was coming through the windows. There was coffee on the counter. I had a board meeting the following Thursday, and a full week of client work, and a life that was entirely, uncomplicatedly mine. "I'm more than okay," I said. My brother came around eventually. It took time, real time. The kind you can't rush. He texted me in April to ask a question about a vendor contract, and I answered it, and he said thanks, and that was enough for a while. By summer we were having actual conversations. He wasn't the enemy. He'd been handed advantages he hadn't asked for and hadn't known how to refuse, and he'd grown into someone shaped by those advantages in ways that weren't entirely his fault. That doesn't excuse how things went, but it explains some of it. My father and I are still working on it. We have a standing monthly call now, 15 minutes, sometimes 30, where he updates me on company performance and I ask questions and we manage, mostly, to sound like two adults who respect each other. It is not warm. It is not the relationship I wanted growing up. But it is honest, and I have learned, somewhere in my 30s, that honest is worth quite a lot. What I want you to take from this, if you're someone who's been sitting at a table where the announcements get made and no one looks at you, is that you don't have to blow anything up. You don't have to make a scene at Thanksgiving. You don't have to send an angry text or cry in the car on the way home or spend years swallowing it. You can just get informed. You can learn what you're entitled to. You can find people who know the rules, and you can learn the rules, and you can show up prepared at a conference table on a grey Tuesday morning and simply be what you already are. That's it. That's the whole thing. My startup, by the way, the marketing consultancy I launched the following spring, after the board seat changed how I saw what I was capable of, cleared $340,000 in its first full year. My mother asked me once if I did it to prove something. I told her I did it because I wanted to. Both things were true. I've had a lot of time to think about what actually happened, not just the shareholder meeting, not just the legal filings, but the whole long arc of it. And what I keep coming back to is this: the way people treat you tends to be a mirror of what they believe you're capable of tolerating. My parents didn't cut me out because I was less capable than my brother. They cut me out because, for years, I had accepted it. I showed up at those dinners, ate the food, swallowed the announcements, drove home on the dark highway, and said nothing. Not because I agreed, because I didn't yet know what I was holding. That's not a criticism of myself. I want to be clear about that. I was learning. Everybody is always learning, and the timeline isn't the same for everyone. But I think there's something important in the sequence. The fact that nothing changed until I changed first. Until I picked up the phone and called my uncle. Until I sat across a desk from Philip and asked real questions and took notes and actually understood the answers. The situation didn't shift because the world became fairer. It shifted because I got informed, and being informed changed what was possible. What my parents did wasn't random cruelty. It was the accumulated result of 100 small choices made over years, where they chose the easier path, favouring the child who was present, rewarding the one who didn't push back, assuming the quiet one would stay quiet. Those choices had consequences they hadn't fully considered, because people rarely do consider the consequences of the choices they're not paying attention to. My brother got handed things he hadn't earned, and those things shaped him in ways he's still working through. My father built something remarkable and then started protecting it in ways that made it smaller. My mother learned to manage everyone's feelings except the ones that were inconvenient to notice. None of that was without cost, even if the bill came later. I think about what I want to carry forward from all of this, and it's 3 things. The first is that intelligence without action is just comfort. I understood for years that something was wrong. Understanding alone changed nothing. What changed things was learning the actual mechanics. How ownership works, what rights exist, what levers are available. And then using that knowledge carefully and deliberately. Wisdom isn't passive, it's something you have to pick up and apply. The second is that integrity under pressure looks quieter than people expect. I didn't flip over the Thanksgiving table. I didn't send a furious email. I finished my turkey, helped clear the dishes, drove home, and then I worked. For months I worked. Carefully, legally, patiently. The moment at the conference table in Westerville wasn't dramatic. It was just prepared. And preparation, when it finally meets its moment, looks a lot like calm. The third is that standing up for yourself is not the same as tearing something down. I never wanted to destroy the company. I never wanted to humiliate my father or take something from my brother. I wanted a seat at a table that had always technically had room for me. I wanted to be seen as what I was: capable, informed, present. The board seat didn't give me that. It just made it impossible to pretend otherwise. My consultancy cleared $340,000 in its first year. My father and I have a standing monthly call. My brother texted me last week about a vendor contract, and I helped him think it through. None of this is the warm family I wanted growing up, but it is honest, and I have learned slowly that honest is something you can actually build on,